without you, but I'm stronger. You thought that I'd be broke without you, but I'm richer. You thought that I'd be sad without you. I left harder.
Moment, we're about to get started, and we invite you to be part of the live streaming of this moment. So we will be inviting the network in to join us for this luncheon, and we're so excited to have our keynote. And are we ready for our MC? All right, thumbs up.
All right, we're all good. If you guys are still nibbling, that is completely fine. Good lunch, wasn't it? Very good. We're happy that you guys are networking, getting to know some of the folks that you're sitting next to at your table. Want to remind you, we have a hashtag change, or I guess addition to the Empower women. We're also going to use hashtag empower her. So make sure you're using those hashtags so we can kind of collect all of the videos and pictures that you are collecting and taking during this event today and tomorrow. Also, want to make a quick announcement. If you are in the Houston area, we had a lot of people raise their hands saying that they're local. The YWCA Houston is accepting new members. So if you're interested in signing up to be a member of the Houston location of YWCA, they do have a sign up table out in the hallway. So if you have any questions, they can get that answered as well as get you signed up for a membership. All right, moving right along for the program, we'll now be hearing an after the pitch success story. So please help me in welcoming Shalisa McNeil to the stage.
So, good afternoon, everybody. I always like to start my conversations because I believe it's a give and take with the question, how many of y'all have had your own personal infernos? By show of hands. How many of you have had your own personal inferno? And by the show of hands, I know what y'all know what I'm talking about. How many of y'all think they disrespectful? Well, that was my reason for creating my business, which we call Fria. And Fria means cold in Spanish. So, literally in 2016, I woke up one day with the idea of cooling jewels. Now, I had been going through my own personal infernos for a few months at that point, and the impetus was I needed to learn more. So to our esteemed speaker prior to me who's talking about you don't make a business based on what you need, right? So I didn't. But I knew as I kept talking to people in these very hushed tones that this was a bigger problem than me. I was not the only one having it, and I was not the only one struggling with options for managing it. So the one thing I learned, and that's the reason why, it's behind the pitch. So I am one of the YWCA pitch winners from Northern New Jersey. And my entrepreneur journey started because I saw a problem. And I believe that problems just need solutions, right? I'm not one of those people who I don't want to lament. I don't want to go back and forth about nothing. Like, tell me what the problem is. And now let's brainstorm some solutions, because that's the only way you're actually viably spending your time. So after having multiple conversations with hundreds of women, I actually started doing like woman on the street interviews, like, what'd your mama tell you about menopause? And the answer 99% of the time was nothing, and she didn't go through it. That was the most mind-blowing thing for me, because I was like, well, it's a normal biological function of a woman's reproductive cycle. So she went through it. But why don't we want to talk about it? So I kept digging, and I learned it was a negative narrative associated with it. Actually, there's a negative narrative associated with every aspect of a woman's reproductive cycle. When you get your menses, you start being admonished about what you shouldn't do, what you can't do. And, and it's a negative thing. And it's not even a great experience, right? In some countries, you're unclean. So you got to go to the unclean hut. And then I was like, when you become a mom, you might have been one of the baddest girls on the yard, right? But all of a sudden now you're a mom. As if that now defines you and you're limited to that. And then when you get to the end of childbearing, you dried up. And so, so part of the goal here, or the emphasis behind my business, was to change the narrative. And that's really what I'm devoted to, like the education aspect. But I also felt like your body needs options, right? So for some women, maybe hormone replacement therapy is an option. But for many of us, it isn't. I wanted to respect the temple. So I'm like, I don't want to stop what's going on. I want it to finish whatever it needs to finish. I just want to be more comfortable while doing it. And I believe that the 1.1 billion women in the world right now who are going through it with me, they want something too. They want an option. And so going through the process of starting this business from scratch, that was where I started from. There's a problem that needs a solution. And now, if we talk about, well, this journey is 7 years in, and I started with nothing, and now I have these pretty bracelets that are designed and manufactured by Swarovski. It was a journey that had its highs, it has its lows, got a lot of lows. But the stick-to-itness and the understanding that if you really believe and you're passionate enough about a problem that requires a solution, and you do your research and you do your homework and you realize that there's a serious pain point that you can address, you just got to stick to it. So now after the pitch, I can say, without marketing, without any major advertising, we've sold almost 800 bracelets. And so that's huge for us because we were validating the point. And now we're doing our research to improve the efficacy of our technology, which is also another thing that we use that's different. We use a passive technology called evaporative cooling. So that's not in the world. Everybody else wants to charge everything. I'm like, I don't think we need any more electromagnetic fields invading our bodies. So now we're in the process of growth. And so that's where we are now. And the support that I've gotten from amazing organizations and women like you, it just like keeps me buoyed up on those days that I feel really low, because this is really hard. So I just want to thank y'all. I'm more than happy to answer anybody's questions. And I'm really grateful for the YW program in general, the Procter & Gamble, and everything that's done to support women entrepreneurship. Thank you.
All right. And Shalisa was just at our table for lunch. She is sold out of bracelets. So visit her website or get some information from her to get one of those bracelets. So good job and congratulations to you. Now we've reached the point of our keynote speaker. Jasmine Crowe Houston is an award-winning social entrepreneur, children's book author, a TED speaker, and determined leader. In 2017, after years of feeding people experiencing homelessness from her own kitchen, Jasmine launched Gooder, a sustainable waste management company that leverages technology to combat hunger and reduce food waste. She has been featured on CNBC, Oprah Magazine, Forbes, Fast Co., New York Times, and named by Entrepreneur Magazine as one of the top 100 influential female founders and Insider's 100 People Transforming Business. Under Jasmine's leadership, Gooder has provided nearly 40 million meals to those in need and redirected millions of pounds of materials from landfill. Jasmine currently sits on the board of Metro Atlanta Chamber, Universal Music Group's task force for meaningful change in Drawdown, Georgia. Let's welcome Jasmine Crowe Houston.
We are all do-gooders because of the work that we do. Someone who would otherwise not be eating is now having a meal, or food that otherwise would have gone into landfill is now being composted or turned into energy or animal feed. We're do-gooders for people and for the planet. Came up with the idea for Gooder in 2016. Before then, I was actually feeding people that were experiencing homelessness and hunger, so mostly on the streets of downtown Atlanta, and then also in low-income senior high-rises. A video of my work actually went viral, and I woke up one morning to thousands of views, comments, and people were saying, who donated the food? This is amazing. And the truth was nobody. I was couponing, price matching, cooking all this food myself. And I started thinking it would be so great if I could get the food donated. So of course I go to Google, what happens to excess food at the end of the night from grocery stores and restaurants? And I fall down this rabbit hole of food waste. And I'm seeing how much food is going to waste while so many people are going hungry. And that made me upset. One of the things I saw right away was that businesses were already paying waste companies to throw away perfectly good food. And I would ask, why don't you guys donate your food? And they would say, oh, people got sued or it's not fast enough. There were so many reasons. And once I saw that, I said, I am going to set up a food waste management company that helps these businesses better manage their food waste. Gooder has built a mobile app as well as a dashboard that allows businesses to easily request pickups when they have surplus food and giving them back all the reports of who this food was going to. So I was offering them a service. We're a one-stop shop. If it's edible, we'll get it to nonprofits. If it's non-edible, we'll get it to compost and help our soil. I don't think people know about the impact that food waste has on the environment. It's one of the leading contributors to global climate change. So you can look at us as business that is for people and for planet. In 2020, of course, we were hit with the pandemic. And so I really went back to my roots and said, how can I be a helper? And we introduced food distribution. This includes our pop-up grocery stores where we bring food right to people for free. We also have a grocery delivery service working with cities and counties serving seniors and food insecure families. And our platform will match food with them. And then we have drivers that actually deliver it directly to these seniors' doorsteps once a week.
I want y'all to know that it starts here. It starts in school. It starts with knowledge. Y'all already on the right track.
We were very lucky to partner with a hip hop star who wanted to work with us to do something special for the middle school that he attended. And so we are building Gooder's first grocery store plus clothing closet right inside of a middle school. It allows families to request food through our app and it's sent home with their students. Just imagine you're an 11-year-old kid, you know that your mom needs help with food, and you can say, Mom, I'll bring home dinner tonight. I'm looking forward to be working with more schools, more cities, looking to bring Gooder grocery stores everywhere. We are taking a radically different approach to solving really age-old problems. I would hope that my legacy would be, this is someone who lived her life in hopes of ending hunger. Will I do it in my lifetime? I'm not sure, but will I continue to work on it in my lifetime? 100%. Good afternoon. Well, I'm so happy to be here. I just want to thank YWCA, P&G, and then TJX for having me. And I am bringing you greetings from Atlanta, but I am a Texas baby. This is where I was born, and I'm really excited to be back and to tell you all my story and my journey in hopes that I can inspire you because, as the sister said that was standing up here before me, entrepreneurship is hard. It is not easy. And so I want to take you guys back really to the day that I say I saw the light. And it was the summer of 2016. I'm sitting in my friend's kitchen and we were having a very funny, jovial conversation that I'll never forget. Ironically, we were being very grateful that social media really wasn't around when we were in college. And there's just no proof of all the terrible outfits and hairstyles and things that we wore. I laughed because I was doing hair in my dorm room. I can't even do my daughter's hair now. So how was I really charging people to do their hair? Who knows? But there's no pictures of how they looked, no pictures of me doing it, no pictures of my outfits when I was going out on the clubs on Thursdays. And so we're having this really good conversation and she offers me a glass of water. And so as I'm sitting at her kitchen island, she opens her refrigerator door. And I see obviously that it was pretty empty. Keep in mind, this is pretty much before Zoom, so I don't know what my face looked like in that moment. But she turns around and she's pregnant with her second child, and she bursts into tears. And she says, Jazz, just my nickname, I know what you're thinking. I always try and keep meals and snacks and goldfish and apple juice in the house for Max, but we're struggling. And I'm sitting here and she's crying profusely. And I'm thinking to myself, this is my homegirl. This is my college roommate. This is someone who is college educated, who had led a successful career, who was married. And she wasn't the face of hunger that I was so used to seeing. She had just moved from New York City to Atlanta, Georgia. She was chasing what I would call the American dream. So when they were living in New York, she was working for Good Morning America. She had went on tour with Zendaya and Alicia Keys and Paula Abdul. She's a makeup artist by trade. And so she thinks, I have one goal. She said, I want my son to have a backyard to play in, and I want him to ride a school bus to school. And that's something that she never experienced growing up on 108th and First Avenue in Spanish Harlem, New York, living on the 18th floor. And so her husband gets a job at State Farm. And they put all of their savings into buying a house. And if anyone has ever purchased a house before, you got closing costs and your deposits and you get furniture. Now add on to that getting a moving truck and moving all your stuff from New York City. And her hope was real simple. She says, oh, Atlanta is the next Hollywood. For sure, I'm going to get right back in the industry. I've been doing this for 10 years at this point. And she gets to Atlanta. And she's thinking, I'll get on at Tyler Perry. There's lots of celebrities down there. But people are saying things like, well, how many Instagram followers do you have? Or would you do my makeup in exchange for an Instagram shout out? But that doesn't feed her 2-year-old son, her unborn child. And it really doesn't pay their bills. And so they struggled. They went from a 2-income household to a 1-income household, having just purchased a house. But the truth is, her story is like 42 million Americans in this country. And every month they have to make critical decisions. They're choosing between paying for their bills, like their rent and their utilities, and paying for food. And what we know is that food is the first to go. And I think why that moment was so peculiar to me and why I call it the day I saw the light. If you're like me and you ever have your little vice and you sneak down in your refrigerator at night, I have my little stove light over the stove in the kitchen. That's all I have. But when I open that refrigerator for my Simply Lemonade and my cheese, I can see the refrigerator. I can see everything so clearly. The white on white light in your refrigerator is probably the brightest light that you have in your household. And so that light had never left my eyes when I saw that my friend was struggling. And the reality is, like her and like me, some of you, whether you know it or not, probably know someone who has experienced hunger at some point in their life, whether they're experiencing it now, it was a couple of years ago during the pandemics when they were a child. People are going hungry in this country. And if you are Black or brown, that number is about 1 out of 3. And what keeps people so often from sharing that and being open is pride and shame. And so I think those were the things that crippled my friend. But why it was even crazier is that she had been volunteering with me, feeding people on the streets for years. So working with me on every other weekend, going out, feeding 400 and 500 people. And I didn't know that she was hungry. But it was a pivotal point in my journey, and it made me think that what I was doing on the streets just wasn't enough. And so I want to take you guys back to that journey. I want to tell you about this entrepreneurial journey that I've been on, because it has been hard. It's been filled with peaks and valleys and highs and lows. But I really have set out to make a difference, and I'm doing that. But I still am at the beginning of a long journey ahead to solve a problem that affects 1 in 8 people on this planet. And so taking you back on the Jasmine journey, I am a military kid. So I grew up all over Texas. So Houston, Dallas, Wichita Falls. I lived in places like Albuquerque, New Mexico, Phoenix, Arizona. My dad gets out of the military when I was 13 years old, and we moved to Charlotte, North Carolina. It was the only place I ever went to school from start to finish. And so I was telling my table mates this earlier. When I was going to college, my parents said, oh, we really want you to be within driving distance to us from home. And so I stayed in North Carolina. And my freshman year, my parents moved to Portland, Oregon. And so here I am in college dorm in North Carolina, freshman year, and my parents live in Oregon. And I really became quite the adult pretty fast, because I couldn't go home on the weekends. And so I couldn't always go home during the summer. It was really interesting. So I started working. I only stayed on campus for 1 year, and I got an apartment the very next year. And so sophomore, junior, senior year, I stayed on campus, and I started working in retail. And if you know anything about retail, there's one day of the year that you never get off, and that's Black Friday. And the trip for me to go home and come back in time would have probably been like $1,000. Now this is, early 2000s. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money now for a plane ticket. But then that was just like, my parents couldn't afford it, and I couldn't afford it either. And so I get a Betty Crocker cookbook from the library, and me and my friend, the one I told you all about, we decided we were going to cook for everybody that couldn't afford to go home for Thanksgiving. It turned out to be about 12 of us in my 1-bedroom apartment. And I cooked everything in the Thanksgiving section. I don't know why, but it was a feast. I mean, it literally was so much food, but that's how I learned to cook. And that would be something that would serve me and serve others in the coming years. And so when I graduated college, I moved. My parents hated Portland because it rained too much. Military family were used to moving. They moved to Phoenix, Arizona again. And I take a job with the Phoenix Suns. My dad, I'm a daughter. We only have girls, and I love sports. So I'm the son my dad never had. So we are huge sports lovers. So we love football. He still owes me $1 million from when the Cowboys won the Super Bowl in 1993. So Dad, if you're on the live stream, I'm still waiting. And so I think I'll take this job with the Suns, and I will play myself right into broadcast journalism, which is what I went to school with. And Phoenix is a very non-diverse city. If you've ever visited, the whole state of Arizona, I think, is 4% Black now. When I was there, I think it was 2 to 3. So it's definitely grown. And the positive with me, though, is I started to find my community with the athletes, because those, sadly, were pretty much all Black players that were on the team of the Suns. And I had an opportunity to help them give back to their communities. And it started to kind of trickle down that this is something I really cared about. I cared about helping people. And so when the opportunity came to do volunteer events, help these players set up their basketball camps, all these different things, that's what I started working on, and I loved it. And there would be big events like the Super Bowl and the All-Star Game, and I would apply to be a minority supplier for event planning and PR, and I would win all the time because there were not many Black women doing it in Phoenix. And so I got these really great opportunities to plan events for athletes like Ray Lewis at the time and Hines Ward, who was playing for the Falcons. And I foreplayed that into becoming a consultant. And I started my first company, which was called Black Celebrity Giving. And as you can imagine, I worked with Black celebrities, and I helped them really define their giving blueprint. How are they going to use their star power for good? And my clients were mostly athletes for the first probably 3 to 4 years of that business. And I did really well, but very seasonally well. So I was super busy around Thanksgiving, Christmas, back to school, and in the summer when they would do their football camps. And I used to have to kind of keep that money and make it last for the entire year. And so I was doing that. And my parents, they played my sister how they played me. When it was time for her to go to college, she wants to go to Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia. And my dad was like, oh, we don't know anybody in Atlanta. He had seen a lot of things in Atlanta, mostly Freaknik. And so it wasn't even around at that time, but he's thinking like, she can't go to Atlanta. Like, she needs some family around. Long story short, I said, I'll go to Atlanta. And so I moved to Atlanta with my sister. And at that time, my parents had just got a divorce after 35 years together. And so I became kind of like the surrogate parent and really helped financially put my sister through Spelman, which is not cheap at all. But I get to Atlanta and I drive through downtown one day and I just see hundreds of people experiencing homelessness. And I'm thinking like, I need to do something. And I'm often asked, what made you start feeding people and cooking meals in your kitchen and feeding people on the streets? And I never have an answer other than something moved me that day. And I don't know if it was God pulling on my heartstrings, but I go home, I post on Facebook, I'm starting this initiative called Sunday Soul. I'm going to start feeding people experiencing homelessness every week. And it's going to be a mixture of old school R&B. So think the Temptations, James Brown, all the fun stuff that Miss Reed was singing earlier that I will not even try to attempt to sing, you guys. But that kind of music and a really good soulful dinner. And the reason I was doing that is as I was working with more celebrities, and once I got into Atlanta, I started to work with more entertainers. So I started with athletes. Then I got the opportunity to start foundations for artists like Future and Jeezy and T.I. and Tiny and Candy Burris Tucker, and doing a lot of that work. I would say to them, hey, you know, the people standing in line for a turkey in November are hungry in April as well. And that just wasn't their focus. They were focused on being entertainers. They were going to be seasonal givers. So this opportunity that I saw to feed people that were on the streets really spoke to me. And so I started doing that, and I was doing that for 3.5 years. And the focus was really on dignity. I realized that as I was volunteering at #lunchbag and making all these sandwiches and going out and giving them to people on the streets, sometimes people would say things like, does that have peanut butter in it? And I would think we just made 1,000 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches to give to people on the streets. And that's the #1 allergy. And we don't think about that. We don't think about that just because someone is homeless, that doesn't negate the fact that they have religious convictions, that they have allergies, that they could be vegan, that, you know, they have dietary restrictions. And so I wanted people to have a dignity and choice in the food that we serve them. And so I was feeding people, I was renting tables and chairs and linens, getting flowers donated from Trader Joe's. And it would look like a similar setup. And I would set up underneath bridges and in parks. And I was doing these pop-up restaurants for about 3 years. And I wake up one morning and this video has gone viral on Facebook. And a lot of people probably want to go viral. I do not suggest it. It was a very scary time for me because I thought something had broken with Facebook. I get on and it's red all across this screen. I've got all these messages, all these things. And it was a 15-second video. You guys probably don't remember, but there was a time when Instagram would only let you share like a 15-second video. And so it was this 15-second little video clip that I had made that was just 15 pictures of us on the streets. And the #1 question that people kept asking was, who donated the food? And the truth, again, was nobody. I was couponing, I was price matching. There's no way I could do this now because food is way too expensive. But at the time, I got really good at making chicken and pasta. And I would look at the grocery circulars every time they would come out on Tuesday. And whatever was on sale, that would be my menu. And I was getting menus made off of Fiverr. I had made a really good friend at Staples, and he was printing the menus for me. And so I was very resourceful. And I was feeding upwards of 300 to 500 people for about $500. And so it was really hard to do. And so this video goes viral. I'm starting to get all these calls from like news stations and talk shows. I went on Harry Connick Jr. at the time when he had this show. And there was a man, and a white man, I'll say that, in Philadelphia who started a GoFundMe. And he said, I saw this group do this in Atlanta, and I want to do this for 150 people. And that man raised $37,000 to do one feeding for 150 people. That money would have allowed me to do my feedings probably for 2 to 3 years. That was the first time that my intellectual property as a Black woman was ever stolen from me without credit. And I realized at that moment that I don't want this to happen again. You know, that if I have ideas and I have ingenuity, I need to capitalize on it. This is something I have been doing for 3.5 years for $5 donations, $10 donations, really caring about the people that I'm serving. Seeing people say once they got out of homelessness, hey, we had to sell our food stamps, but we brought the kids down here to eat because we needed to pay our rent. And a person takes my idea and says, hey, I saw someone do this in Atlanta. I want to do the same thing. Doesn't reach out to me, doesn't ask me how I do it. Creates some crazy budget that he estimated it was going to be like $200 to feed each person, and raises $37,000, which I could tell you, I never saw the pictures of him doing it, but I could tell you, unless these people were eating, I'm guessing like steak, king crab legs, not snow crab legs, you know, king crab legs cracked with the butter, there is no way that this would have cost this man $37,000 to do this for 150 people. And so I started thinking like, hey, I need to I want to do something with this idea. And so as I researched those questions, I saw that what happens, who donates the food, I figured I'm going to get this food donated and I'm going to start figuring out a way to feed more people. And so I go to Google and I Google what happens to extra food at the end of the night from businesses, thinking some magical checklist is going to appear with all the restaurants that donate food and I could just go and pick up. But what I did is I fell into a deep rabbit hole around food waste. And I learned that in this country, we waste 72 billion pounds, and that's billion with the B, of food every year. That's 40% of all the food that we produce. We spend $220 billion, 2% of US GDP, of all that we spend in this country on food that we never eat. And I think about that day that my friend, who was college educated, who had worked for 15 years at this point with 2 kids, didn't have food in her refrigerator. And I'm not understanding, how could this be? How can we be living in a country that's so rich and so resourceful, yet we're throwing away all this food? I'm feeding 400 and 500 people on the streets. People are having to sell their food stamps to pay their rent, to get on the MARTA, to come downtown and feed their children, but we're wasting all of this food. And at the same time, we were starting to see the emergence of the food delivery apps. Now, these really skyrocketed in 2020. Had the trajectory for food delivery been without the pandemic, we probably would have just now started using the DoorDashes and Instacarts now. So they were really slow back then. So I was getting these referral codes from friends. Hey, get $10 off your first Uber Eats order. And I think I should build an app that when businesses have excess food, they can request a pickup. We'll pick it up. We'll deliver it to nonprofits, and I'll give the businesses the tax write-offs. And I did what you would call customer discovery. And I would go to so many restaurants, and I think we've all seen it, right? We've been to a banquet, a wedding, there's empty tables, there's all this extra food, and you start to wonder, like, what's happening to it? And it's going to waste. And so I started asking that question everywhere I went. My secret number was 100. I wanted to ask 100 different businesses what they were doing with their food. So this looked like grocery stores, restaurants, hotels, convention centers. I started asking my friends that worked in corporate America, what happens to the cafeteria food? And 99 out of 100 came back that they threw it away. There was one organization that donated to a local church. And so I knew that there was a potential business case. Then I started asking, well, why do you throw the food away? Why don't you donate it? And that's the number one thing I think as an entrepreneur you have to understand are what are the pain points? What's going to be the value proposition? What are you going to solve for these customers and why would they pay you for it? And what I realized is that there was a fear of liability. People, I remember one restaurant I went to, they were like, yeah, someone sued us back in 1996. I go back, look at the court case. I'm trying to find it. The restaurant opened in 2012. So the guy just totally just lied. This myth had just been passed down. They had been sued in 1996. Restaurant didn't even open until 2012. But through my research, I learned that under President Bill Clinton in 1996, there was something called the Good Samaritan Act that specifically stated no business can be sued for the donation of goods in the spirit of service. And so I needed to educate people on that. But I had to go further. And I thought, well, what do waste companies do? And as we all know, our trash provider gives us a trash bin, right? And they come and pick it up every week. So I knew I needed to provide the packaging materials and the labels for this food to go in. And so I created these systems, and then I started to insure the food. And for the first probably year and a half, as I was trying to raise money for the company, I went and picked up all this food myself, hence why I do not have that Honda anymore. I picked up black beans. I picked up all kinds of stuff, and I learned that the food needed to be packaged in a certain way because that car, no matter how many times I cleaned it, that black bean smell never went away. And I guess this is a sad thing. I knew I was never going to be able to sell it. I had let a friend borrow it, and they wrecked it. And well, I mean, I got my insurance check, so I was happy because the car was never going to sell because of the smell. So I digress. But I learned so much about the business as I was going, but I didn't have the funding. I remember thinking it was going to be like building a website to build an app. And if anyone has ever thought about entering technology, it's really expensive. I started getting quotes from developers, and they were coming back 200,000, 100,000, 300,000. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. Like I didn't have that money. At this point, my sister had just graduated Spelman. My parents were now divorced. I didn't have what many people that don't look like me have, which is friends and family that could give them their first 500,000, 600,000 to start their business. So I started entering pitch competitions. And believe it or not, I have been teased mercifully for my voice as a kid. And so I was like, I am not going to get on a stage and talk about this business. But I saw a pitch competition with $25,000 in prize money. So I was like, okay, listen, you're going to figure it out. So I used to practice. And my secret to learning how to pitch is I pretended I was a rapper. And at the time, this is 2017, there were two really popular songs. One was called Humble by Kendrick Lamar, and the other one was called Mask Off by Future. And if I listened to those two songs back to back, they were about 5 minutes and 30 seconds. And I wasn't rapping the songs, but I learned to ride the beat. And I learned to talk about the statistics about what I was planning to do, how much food was going to waste, where the business opportunity was. And I would know that when Kendrick Lamar got to the second verse of his song, that I needed to be wrapping up. And I practiced every single day. And I would make myself do my pitch 10 times right before I would go to bed. Even if I got all the way to the last minute and I got it wrong, I would make myself start over again. And so I knew, if nothing else, when I got on that first stage for that pitch competition, nobody had practiced as much as me. Like, I also stopped liking Future's song and Kendrick Lamar's song, because by that time I had heard them hundreds of times, but I practiced so much. And I won that first $25,000. And I would go on to win about $250,000 in prize money. And so that was really what allowed me to get the first version of the technology built. And it was good because I won a customer, a really big customer that's still a customer today, which is the Atlanta airport. And I pitched to them by downloading their sustainability report, understanding that 27% of everything in landfills was food. And I messaged them and I got on the phone with the sustainability director and I said, you know, the Atlanta airport is wasting 20 million meals, and College Park, Georgia has 65% of kids living in poverty. Y'all should be ashamed. And so, you know, she was like, how did you know that? I was like, I just downloaded your sustainability report and this is how much waste you have. And 27% of this, I mean, the fact that I got that meeting was great, you know, but it really wasn't truly based. I don't know still to this day exactly how much food waste they had, but I know they had millions and millions of pounds of waste. And so I get the meeting, I get the customer, and now they're like, let's get started. And I don't have the technology built. So now I'm like on the ball to like get this technology built. The positive is that the airport is a government facility, so they operated on a different fiscal year. So I pretty much won this contract, let's say in September of 2017. It wasn't going to start until July 1 of 2018. So I really needed to get everything that I had pitched these people and kind of made them feel guilty about done in these next few months. But I needed more money. And so I heard about venture capital. And if you don't know about venture capital, anyone know about venture capital? It's a pretty rough thing for women as a whole, and particularly Black women. So women collectively get less than 2% of all venture capital funding. And then you think of all of the different ethnicities of women, right? So last states, Hispanic, Latino women got less than about 0.5%. Black women got about 0.6%. White women got about 1%. Asian women got about 7%. So we split this small circle. When you think about the fact that 94% of venture capital goes to white men, they represent 30% of the population. They get 94% of venture capital. So I'm wondering, like, can I go out and I do this? But it was the only way. Like, there was no other way to build technology, really scale up a company, charge customers 6 figures, right, to do this work without investing in it. I ended up taking 218 meetings before one investor ever told me yes. And a lot of times I always would say, after 50, I'm going to quit. But people will say, well, how did you keep going? I always had the next meeting already booked. And so that's what kept me going. And I'll never forget the number was 218 because that's my birthday. And I always think of that as being kind of like serendipitous, which is how it happened. But I was pitching to most venture capital investors are wealthy. They've went to top Ivy League business schools. They don't really care about hunger, food waste. And so I literally had to change my whole pitch. A lot of times I would go in and I would talk about hunger and how many people are going hungry and how much food is going to waste and how I was going to solve this. And those investors would be like, how am I going to make money? You know, what is the return on the investment? So what I had to really start pitching myself is the waste component. And I would research how much money waste companies make. And waste is something that never goes away. It's not sexy, but no one in this room is going to call your trash company tomorrow and say, listen, I just want to keep all my trash here, unless you're a hoarder. But for the most part, you're going to want to pay, you're paying that trash bill. You're going to get that trash picked up on a consistent basis. It's $1 trillion industry across the globe. Trillions and trillions of dollars is spent on waste. And so that's how I started pitching this story. But still, investors weren't investing. I think a lot of times investors they're going to invest on things that they can feel compassion about, like that they get excited about. And at this time, it's all Bitcoin. That's everyone was talking about Bitcoin and blockchain. Are you using blockchain? Are you using Bitcoin? I'm like, no, I'm feeding people. Like it wasn't going across. But I finally met an investor from Detroit, Michigan, a Black man. He had a very ambiguous name, Charles Hudson. And in hindsight, I should have known he was Black because everyone would say, like, had you met Charles? Have you met Charles? You need to talk to Charles. You should meet Charles. You should talk to Charles. I was like, introduce me to Charles. I had this meeting with Charles. He's on Zoom and he calls in and it just black and white letters, you know, it says Charles Hudson. And then he gets on camera and he's a Black man, the first Black man in 218 meetings, Black person, not Black man, Black person that I met with. And I like jumped back like, oh my God, he's Black. Like I could talk about, maybe I'll just give him my original pitch. And I give him my original pitch and he's like, I get it. I'll invest. I'll put in 300,000. After he said yes, within about 2 weeks, all these investors that have said no were like, hey, I heard Charles was investing. Like, let's have this conversation. So I ended up raising in October of 2018, $1 million. Thank you. And I think the saddest thing about it is at the time I became just the 35th Black woman ever to raise $1 million in venture capital. And I was so upset about that because I was thinking 35, like that's nothing. Like that's, I knew everybody. Like we have a little Google forum group because there were so few of us that I was like, hey, I want to change this. More women that look like me have these genius ideas. Why don't we have access to funding? And so that's been one of the things that I've been really focused on. We've continued to grow the company. We really focus on large scale businesses. So we're not going to mom and pop restaurants. Our customers are airports, convention centers, stadiums and arenas, colleges and universities, lots of food in one location that we can get distributed to a lot of different organizations. As you saw briefly in the video, in 2020, I thought the whole business was going to crash because every customer we had was like, stopping work, we're closing our offices, we're not going to be in business anymore. And I'll never forget, it was March 8th is the day that the state of Georgia shut down. Luckily, Georgia didn't stay shut down for long. Like I think in an interesting way, like our governor was like, I don't know how the clubs and stuff were open. People were coming to Georgia. It was like the vacation spot during the pandemic. But there was a time where I was like, okay, what am I going to do? And I made what's called a pivot. And in many of your businesses, you will sometimes have to pivot. You may run into something where there's a trademark on what you're building. Somebody else has the market locked, or there's, your block liability won't let you do it, whatever it is. But if you could learn to pivot, the power of the pivot is really critical. And so what I pivoted to was hunger. And so we introduced a new business line, which was called Hunger Solutions. So we have food waste solutions in which we help businesses reduce their food waste. We track it. We tell them dollar for dollar how much they're saving in tax deductions, how many pounds they're keeping out of landfill, what that means for CO2 emissions that they're helping to prevent. We create these really compelling reports that they put in their board reports and on their websites of how they're improving their carbon footprint. And so we do all this great stuff, but then we help businesses rethink how they're solving hunger. And so our first customer during the pandemic actually was the Atlanta Public School District. I got a call from the then superintendent. Her name was Dr. C. And she said, hey, we've got 55,000 students that get free breakfast and lunch. and they're going to be learning virtually, and we don't know how we're going to get these kids their food. Is there any way you guys can help us? And so during the pandemic, we were responsible for getting all of those students' meals delivered to them so that they could eat at school. And then we helped them. Oh, thank you guys. Then we helped the school district create a route scheme of putting the meals on school buses and going to the school routes. And then that didn't work well, because by that time it was like a month later, those kids were not waking up at the same time that the buses used to come. So the schools ended up having a lot of excess food, and we would take that food and then donate it to seniors. We started working with the city of Atlanta, Fulton County, Gwinnett County, different counties to help them rethink how they were solving hunger. We introduced meal delivery programs, pop-up grocery stores. We had the opportunity to work with some of the biggest brands. So from everybody to the NBA, to State Farm, to Amazon, those are who we call our customers. And in 2021, we opened our first in-school grocery store. And now we have about 25 all over the country, including we have 2 in Texas. We just opened one in Dallas 2 weeks ago. So these grocery stores, it is a business model. We're paid to build the grocery store, stock the grocery store, and the stores are free for families. And so each of our grocery stores supports anywhere from 300 to 500 students every single week. They're sponsored, so we sell sponsorships to the stores, and we have celebrities that have sponsored stores. We have brands like Aetna and Amazon that have sponsored stores, and the greatest thing about it is we're providing people dignity in the food that they get, because a lot of times people don't understand there's a big difference in this country between access to meals and access to food. And, there's people who will give you a box of food and it'll be sealed up, and you'll get home and you'll open it, and there's 30 things in there that you've never seen, that you've never ate. And that's the experience that a lot of people that are food insecure in this country face. It's a really vicious cycle. You've got to go here to get peanut butter, here to get jelly, here to get bread. This place gives you spaghetti. You don't have spaghetti sauce. You don't have meat. And so there's this cycle. And what we've done at Gooder is we've broken that. And so anytime that anyone ever touches us, we are guaranteeing that they're leaving with 7 to 10 days worth of food, which is the average amount of time that people are food insecure. So we've really helped to redirect that. We've built a multi-million-dollar business. We've provided millions of meals to people in need. And a lot of people told me that I would not be able to do it. And so what I want to be able to tell you all today is that a lot of people have great ideas. And as you've probably heard before, it really is about execution. But beyond that, it's really about belief. Because if I would have listened to everybody, including my dad, he hates when I tell this story, but I searched his name one day, and mostly things that came up was Indeed. Because between 2017 and 2018, when I was taking those investor meetings and people were telling me no, he was like, Chubby, that's my nickname. He was like, you're going to need to get a job. And I was like, no, this is going to work out. I believe it's going to work out. And now they have turned into really big fans and believers, but everybody's not going to believe. It's really important that you believe. It's really important that you have enough conviction to walk into any room and believe that you not only deserve to be there, that you belong there. And that if people will give you an opportunity, they will win and you will win as well. And so we have now went on to raise an additional $8 million. We have a company now that employs almost 80 people in Atlanta. We have an office as well as a warehouse, and we're growing. And when I started this company, I really started with nothing. Just the idea that we could solve hunger and that we could change what was happening with food waste. And so, like I said at the beginning of this talk, I still believe that we're just at the beginning. We're 6 years old. It's really crazy to think that we've done all that we've done in 6 years, but we are 6 years old, and if you were a baby, right? I have a 2-year-old, or almost 21-year-old, but she's 2. And when she's 6, she'll just be in first grade. So, it's still a baby. It's still something that I'm working on. And a lot of times people will say, what is your hope for the next 10 years? And I often will say, I just want to still be here. I don't have these ambitions to sell for hundreds of millions of dollars and do all these things. I just want to still exist, because there are so many people that message us and that believe that we've helped change their lives. I want to end by telling you 2 things. One, my friend is doing great. She was caught up in the strike a couple of months ago. As you guys know, there's been the actors and the writers strike, but it's off and she is back on Tyler Perry's set and she's doing well. So it turned around for her. But struggle doesn't last always, but it will happen. And so I want you all to remember the heart. You know that 75% of this country is a paycheck away from being like my friend. And so when you think about why it's important for the work that we do, think about her and then think about 75%. If you have 4 friends, 3 of them could be just like mine. So she's doing really well now. And then I want to share a story from a lady named Bertha who sent me an email that I will never forget. And it is my guiding light today that keeps me doing the work that I do. Now, I assume Bertha is a senior, but I don't know. She may have just been named Bertha and she could be 25. But she sent me an email and she said, I want to say thank you guys so much for hosting that pop-up grocery store yesterday. When I got home, my meat wasn't brown. And she said, you guys got me food that was good and it was quality food. And, you know, that was the best thing I've ever experienced. It was so organized. The reason why I think about her stories till this day is that imagine her situation. The fact that her expectation when she goes someplace to receive food for free would be that it would be brown, that it would be marked down, that it wouldn't be good, that she would go home probably having medication that is requiring that she take it with food and not even be able to receive something that is good. And so her email lives in my heart and it is really my guiding light because we have to change that in this country. There is no reason why a senior citizen who probably worked their entire lives as a teacher, a firefighter, or a nurse sends an email just thanking us for the fact that we gave her something fresh. And so that is my guiding light. And I want to thank you guys and I'll take your questions. Thank you so much.
All right, look, I want to feel special like Michelle was earlier, so I'm going to have a seat next to you.
Sit down. Don't stand in heels. Don't stand too long.
I know, right? Well, your story obviously very inspirational to a lot of folks here today. Some of the things that we were talking about is the challenge of being an entrepreneur. So what would you say would be one of your biggest challenges in your 6th year and how you were able to overcome it and keep pushing through?
Yeah, I would say early on, it was definitely funding, you know, trying to raise the capital. I would say lately it's been team because when you first start, I always like to say we've moved from a family to a village. And, you know, if you're a village, you kind of all root for the same team, but you maybe don't eat at their house, right? Like that's just kind of the thing. Like y'all live in the same neighborhood, but we don't eat over there. We don't go over there. We kind of stick to ourselves. And I think as the team has started to grow, you see a lot of those interpersonal conflicts. And that's something that as a company that started with a team of 1, I never dealt with. So learning that like Susie doesn't like Harry and Harry doesn't like, and it's just so much. Sometimes I'm like, y'all, look, we're trying to solve hunger, you know? So I think that has been something that I've needed to work on. I also realized that, and this is something I think all women deal with, I can't be everything to everybody. And I think a lot of when you're building a company, you go from 1 employee to 80 employees and, you know, you bring on all these people of different kind of diversities and you try to be liked. And I've realized that everybody's not going to like me and sometimes I'm going to say things as a leader like, hey, this is how it needs to be and this is how it will be. You know, this is the way that we're going. And as a woman leader, sometimes you get classified as, I won't say the word, but like a bitch, right? And it's just kind of like, hey, if a man told you that here we don't do this, you'd probably just respect it. But because you're a woman and because you're a Black woman, sometimes you get labeled as angry or you're being a B or you're doing things. But I just have to realize that everything I've done has gotten us this far. And sometimes I have to remind myself and remind them that without me, wouldn't none of us be here. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's sometimes like you don't want to have an ego, like Beyonce says, but sometimes you got to have a little ego and you've got to pat yourself on the back and build yourself up because this world will tear you down. So I think that's been a challenge as of lately. It's just like building. I think early on, I believe that everybody was there for the vision. Sometimes now I believe people may just be there for the paycheck. And that's a tough thing for me when I want people there to feed people. So like learning to decipher that. But, you know, the people that are meant to be will stay and we'll keep on going. But I would just say learning to cultivate like your leadership and working on your leadership. I love that we mentioned like Brene Brown, and I read a lot like TD Jakes. His Disruptor book is really good. You have to be disruptive and you have to be like a strong leader, and realize that everybody won't like you, and that's okay, especially if you're like someone that wants to be liked. And as women, sometimes we tend to want to be liked. We want to cater to others. You got to remember to cater to yourself.
And you mentioned one of your guiding lights is the email that you got
Mhm.
from one of your customers, clients. I'm not sure how you
One of the people we
named
serve.
them. Yeah.
client.
How do you mentioned wearing all these different hats, being a mom, being an entrepreneur. How do you pour into yourself to keep yourself going other than getting that feedback from the people that you service?
Yeah, and I'm a wife too, which is probably the hardest of all
Yeah.
of them. It's like the toughest one. So I would say, early on I didn't. And I remember in 2019, I had almost 20 fibroids removed. And when I was talking to the doctor, she said, well, one of the biggest reasons why women get fibroids is stress. And I kept thinking of how often I've been stressed. What I've always said to myself is, I will never work myself to a point that it's too much, and so if I am sacrificing home and health and things of that nature, then it's not worth it for me to continue to do it. So I do try and find that balance. I journal a lot. I was working out a little bit more before. At the start of the year, I'm on it. November,
Tail ends
it's
off,
a little, yeah. So January, back in the gym. So I'll go back to the gym, go to boot camp. I garden. That was a pandemic hobby I picked up. So I love to garden, and I'll go out in my garden with my daughter. I call it a wine garden because I have a glass of wine when I'm in, or two, when I'm in the garden. So I do things like that. And I like to travel. I like to travel a lot. So those are the things that I try and do. But I was really bad with self-care probably for the first 3 years of the company. Like terrible. Like working from 9 until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, not sleeping. And those are things that you've got to do a lot better on too. So my thing is, for the first 30 minutes of my day, I try not touch my phone. And that's like, I plug my phone up like in a whole nother room. I actually brought an alarm clock, which is crazy. Like, you imagine going into Target, like, can y'all show me the alarm clock? I mean, the people were like, what is that? Like, use your phone. Yeah. So, but I realized I was waking up, and the first thing I was doing was just getting on my phone, like looking on Instagram, looking on Twitter. And I just need to wake up and get with myself. Thank God for waking me up for another day. Be intentional with setting my days. So since I've done that, I think that's been the best thing. And that was something. My new year technically starts my birthday, which is in February. So that's
Mine's
when
the 19th, by the way.
Oh, you're the day after me. That's so cool. So that's when I started, and I've stuck to that.
Awesome. And again, there's a lot of nuggets that everyone's speaking about. So what would be your one nugget you want folks to take away from this 48-hour summit from you?
I'll tell you, it's a nugget that my grandmother said to me. She'll be 90 next year. She said, plan your work, then work your plan. And I think that's the number one thing you could do. I'm still someone that writes to-do lists. As terrible as my handwriting is, I will write a to-do list, and these are all the things I need to do today. And I have a crazy little joy, for whatever reason, of scratching something off that list. But I live by what she has said, because that's really what it's about. When you talk about execution, no execution happens without doing. So you have to have a plan, but then you got to work the plan. So who is it going to be? I love the marketing presentation. I was like taking so many notes and sending our marketing people like, we've got to get her to come. But I was saying to it is like, you got to set goals, and then you got to work them. Like, that's the biggest thing. So if you want to reach 100 new customers this week, whatever it is, set that plan and then just work it. How are you going to do that? And so that's kind of what I will do. Is I set a goal of, I wanted 50 grocery stores by 2025. So I've got really like a year to do it, and I'm about halfway there. So I got a lot of work to do over the next, let's say 13, 14 months, but it's all about like working the plan.
And do you ever, I know once we get into kind of work mode, we're just tunnel vision. I know you mentioned that you're 6 years in, so it's still your baby, but do you ever take a moment to just like sit back and enjoy what you've put your hands on? Have you ever kind of self-reflected and really seen that one conversation that you had with your friend has spun into this multi-million-dollar company.
Yeah.
You now have employees, you now have warehouses, you're now in different schools, different states, different cities. I mean, what is that like? How do you feel about that?
I think I need to do better. I think because it's still, like I think about Bertha's email often, I have it printed out. If you ever come to our offices, I have it in my office. And I just think there's still so much that needs to be done. Like, I think that's where it's kind of like, if you guys have ever heard the analogy, like the basketball player that shoots and he's like looking at his form and he makes the perfect three. And then the team, I love sports, by the way, but then the other team is down there scoring.
Yeah.
A lot of times you don't have enough time to like celebrate that score,
Right.
because it's one thing to win the battle. It's another thing to win the war.
Mhm.
And I think when I'm trying to win the war on hunger, it's like tough to kind of just feel like I could celebrate. But, I'll take the things. I remember I went to visit my dad 2 weeks ago. I was speaking in Phoenix, and he has all these articles and like magazine covers. I mean, it was like a little creepy, but it was like a little shrine. It was like a little shrine to me. And I thought, this is so cool. Like, he just had printed everything, and his wife has put stuff in frames. And that was kind of like, so sometimes when I don't celebrate myself, that's why it's important to have a team of people around you that will celebrate you.
Mhm.
Because I know that there are people that are praying and lifting me up, even on days where I'm just feeling like, oh, I still got to do more. There's still, there's still so many people. We get, for all the great emails we get, and we get tons of them, we get hundreds of emails of people that are like, hey, I need food. I don't have food. I'll get $20 a month in food stamps. I'm disabled. I don't drive. I'm, like these things. And you just feel like you need to do more. The state of Alabama is building $1 billion prison right now. And they are using the scores of kids that are in 3rd, 5th, and 8th grade and saying like, we're going to need $1 billion prison. When you think about, wow, if they gave me $1 billion, I could feed everybody. And, of course, the kid can't read on his grade level if he's not eating every night. And I think a lot of times when this is a true story, right?
Right.
We're in Texas. This is one of the states. There's 27 states in this country that look at these scores and determine how many prisons that we need. And I think no teacher could ever teach through hunger. I have the utmost respect for teachers, because even if you give a kid free breakfast and lunch, that breakfast is going to replace the dinner that they didn't get that night before. Lunch is replacing breakfast. So you have kids that are sitting in class and they're wondering when and where their next meal is going to come from. And a teacher can't teach through that. And if it's an older kid, not only are they wondering about their meals, they're wondering about their little brothers and sisters. So that's why I'm like, I need more of these grocery stores and schools. And I think a lot of times, and true entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs for certain, which I encourage more people, we need more. You really do, you get invested. I met a brother who's from Houston. I want you guys to look him up. He has a company called 8 Million Stories. And he's trying to, someone knew him. Yeah, he's a great guy. And he's trying to disrupt the prison pipeline. And we were having these conversations, and there's a lot of work to do. And I think what me and him had in common was just like the feeling like we've got to do everything we can in the next, I'm going to live until I'm 104. So I have some years to go, but I still got to do a lot in the next few years. So I will tell you, that is something in the new year, that'll be a New Year's resolution that I will try and keep, is to do more celebrating, but I think it is hard.
Do we have time for questions? Questions?
I love Good to Great was a really good one. I think that was a really good one. There's one that's forgetting. It's called The Energy Bus. It's a really good book. It talks about like the energy and like having people bring good energy, and like that you are the energy that you bring. The Bible, the Bible app was definitely, people call it a book. I would read the app and do different plans. And I was like being Mary Jane at the very beginning of the business. I had like these little Post-its all over my window, like, this, your business will do this. And it was so crazy. I had a Post-it one day that said like, your business will be worth $2 million. And just the ability to scratch that off and be like, you're worth way more than that now, was just like a crazy vision. So sometimes just putting things you tell yourself are so real, and we could be negative to ourselves, and we could say things like, this ain't going to work. Why are you doing that? So I really try to feed myself a lot of positivity. I just have not been able to listen to books. That's my only thing. I feel like I still kind of like, I like writing to-do lists. I like reading books. Yeah. So as of lately, with my kid like knocking the book out of my hand, it's been a little harder to read. But when she goes to sleep, it's kind of like my reading time. And I just actually got a reading light that clips on your bed, so it's pretty cool. So that allows me to read late at night. So Good to Great is a good one. The Energy Bus is good. T.D. Jakes' most recent book, Disruptor, is really good as well. And Reid Hoffman has a really good book. The name is slipping my mind, but that's where he talked about the concept of going from family to village. Like once you go from a small company to a big company, and he, built LinkedIn, and he was he's pretty good, pretty wealthy man.
You have one more question?
I have a question about how do you stay driven and to continue to go, like when you were saying you wrote like your speech 10 times, you practiced it 10 times every night, and then you saw 218 investors and they said no.
Yeah.
And
this was when I was traveling too. I always want to say that too. Like my friend had given me her Southwest buddy passes, honey, and I was traveling to go and meet investors. Like this is pre-Zoom. So I would fly to San Francisco. I had a couple of Delta friends that gave me buddy passes. So I would take the first flight into San Francisco, take a red eye out. And so I would try and stack in like 10, 15 investor meetings if I could in a day. I think I stayed, my friend, and I always tell everyone, she does let me tell her story because, we're cool. I don't want anyone thinking like she just throwing her friend out. Yeah, like, there. No. She lets me tell her story. But that really was pivotal. And I think, if you're solving something that's close to you and that you've experienced, it does give you a different level of drive. But I do think I had done the work. Like I had already been feeding people. And that's the big difference. There's companies that have started trying to do similar things that we've done, but maybe they were like some students that just kind of started working on something at a hackathon or a venture studio in college, but like seeing what it was like to work with people that were hungry, knowing what it's like to be hungry and not know where your meal is coming from, or to understand what it's like for people living on the marginal poverty line and just feeling like you've got to fight for them. I think the number one thing that I've always said that's kept me driven is hunger disproportionately affects people that look like me. And I should be at the table to help solve it. And there's too many times when we're not. So that's been like the driver for me, is like, listen, you're going to let me in this door, I mean, that's kind of thing. My friend that was pregnant, when she was pregnant, one day we went to Red Lobster. She's like, they're going to let me in here. I was like, they're open. They're going to let you in. But that's kind of it's funny because that's how I feel about this business. Like they're going to let me in to solve this hunger fight, because it's affecting us, and we deserve to be part of the solutions that are being created for problems that face us. And too often it's not. Like, I think that's the issue. Just like the sister who's starting something for menopause, that's like, why there will be a man that would create something like that and get all the money for it. He'll never go through menopause. That happens all the time. So we need to be part of the solutions that we're trying to, that are affecting us. Because if we're not at the table, decisions are getting made for us. And that's happening all the time now. Literally decisions are getting made for women for stuff that we go through that men don't even deal with. Absolutely. And so I think the drive is like, I need to be at the table for this.
I think that is it. We have one more. Okay, we're gonna. From this morning. Hold on.
Quick question, beautiful story. My question though is, where do we find investors? How are you finding, these people, even with the 217 that said no? I would love to even be able just to have somebody to even talk besides the wonderful people at YWCA and 360.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. What is your business?
Several, but the main one that I'm really interested in getting funding for is called a community hub, where we would be basically doing services in the community, such as mental health. What else do we do, Mom? It would be the mental health. It would be any other type of fee for service that they would get through the state.
Yeah.
So I would love, and it's definitely profitable.
Yeah.
But again, several ideas, but and all these other beautiful women, where do they even go? Like
That's
you
a great
said,
question.
you know?
Yeah, there's a lot. So one, venture capital is something that I would say, could I do it all over again? I probably wouldn't have went the venture capital route, right? Because venture capital is not patient capital. And what patient capital is like, hey, I'm going to give you money. I know it's going to take you time to do what you want to do. And I'm going to be patient as you get there. Venture capital is like, you know, hey, last year you did $2 million. This year you should do 5. Next year you should do 10. And so it's like, it pressures you to move a little faster. If that's the route you want to go to, that's fine. There's Crunchbase, Angel List. Those are just 2 sites you could go to. Crunchbase, you can look up companies that are similar to you. And the thing I would tell everybody is there is always competition. You said that, ma'am, that asked the question. You said that earlier. There is always a competitor. Understand if there is someone who's doing something even on a level bigger than you, where do they get their funding from? Who has funded them? And so what I started doing is I was like, who's funding Feeding America? Who's giving the money to the food bank? They list their donors. If you have a nonprofit, you should go and look at the biggest nonprofits. So if you're trying to do hunger, look at, Houston Food Bank. If you're trying to do something for domestic violence, whomever it is, look at these nonprofits, get their IRS 990, which is public, and you'll see who their donors were. And now you can kind of pitch to those same donors. You can also look into grants. So I think you should look into grants for certain, because grants are non-dilutive. At the end of the day, I still own a lot of Gooder, and that's because it's been really hard for me to raise venture capital. I've raised it, but probably at the stage that I am with the revenue that we've done way more in revenue than we've raised in capital. Most people have raised way more in venture capital than they've done in revenue. With that, it's good because I still own a good amount of my company, but non-dilutive is the best way to go after it, because then you own everything. So research where your competitors are getting funding. Angel List is good because Angel will give you like high net worth individuals that want to make investments. You can look at giving circles if you're trying to do something in the social landscape. Giving circles are like groups of people that are giving money to different locations. And then I think pitch competitions, practice pitch competitions again are prize money, non-dilutive, get involved, get that. And I'm trying to think, there's some other websites. There's one, I think it's called FS6. What I will do is when I get to my phone, I'll find it. I'll make sure that I give it to you guys and you can send it out to everybody, because that's a really good one. You can get into like, that one has like accelerators, different programs that you can be involved in to kind of refine your business, and then they'll invest in you. But Crunchbase will give you all the venture capital investors that you want to meet with. And the secret is venture capital investors actually get kind of check marks for the more meetings that they take. So that's why so many people took meetings with me and then invested in me, because they are kind of measured on how many meetings they take. So it's good for you to take some and just see, get the feedback from them, refine it, and get better. So thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, we are going to take a quick break and then meet back in about 15